I just listened to every album by Kiss, and here are my thoughts. Yes, all 24 albums, if you count the 4 solo albums that they each did. That was quite an undertaking, but surprisingly, I didn't really lose interest going through it, and my respect for the band had gained quite a bit. So going back, I mean, I bought a Kiss Greatest Hits album when I was 14 or 15 or something like that. And I knew those songs. I actually saw Kiss live in February 2019 as well. So I was familiar with their most popular songs, but I had never gone in any more than that. So Kiss starts out in 1974 with their self-titled debut. And some people think that this is their best album. I've seen it on the top of some people's lists. And it is really good. It's not quite on the top of my list, but it is packed with really good songs. These first 3 albums don't land in my favorites, and I think the main reason is production. You know, later on, Kiss just had such a big sound, and it really showed in their production and in their songwriting. It was a little bit more mature. In these earlier albums, they were really good at writing catchy songs, but it sounded like these songs were entirely based around one idea, like one hook, one riff that they had thought of, and they built the whole song around that. By contrast, their 4th album, Destroyer, which was my favorite, just comes at you with big production and such big ideas. Detroit Rock City was on this album. That's still one of my favorite Kiss songs. God of Thunder is another just clear winner for me. Clearly one of the best songs of their discography. Beth is on this album too, which I know is cheesy, but it's hard not to like it. Right after Destroyer, they released Rock and Roll Over in the same year, and the band complains that this album was a little bit rushed, and it has a lot of good ideas. They're clearly still on kind of a high in terms of songwriting, but I can also hear the rush quality in this album, particularly in that it kind of returns to the production style of their first 3 albums, where I felt like the songwriting was a little bit simpler. Still some, really big songs and really good ideas coming through here, like in I Want You, and Calling Dr. Love is a really good song too. But they bring it right back with Love Gun, which was another just amazing album by them. Back to that just really big, grandiose sound. Almost every song on this album was really good, except for Christine 16. They should be on an FBI watch list for writing this song. So after this, each of the band members records their own solo album, and they release it all on the same day. And to me, the clear winners out of these 4 were Ace Frehley and Paul Stanley. And the clear losers being Peter Criss and Gene Simmons. Peter Criss's album had sounded kind of like Rod Stewart-y, and Gene Simmons' album was really unexpected as well. It had flip-flopped between a lot of different ideas, but I'd really hoped that Gene Simmons would own his demon imagery a bit more and maybe bring us some God of Thunder kind of songs. Whereas Paul Stanley had showed his strength in writing big Kiss hits, and Ace Frehley's songwriting, I think, was surprisingly the best out of all of them. His guitar work was great. The way he approached the music had a little bit more forethought, I thought, whereas Paul just has a knack for writing hits. Right after these albums, they go into what most people say is their weakest territory, Dynasty and Unmasked and Music from the Elder. Surprising that it only lasted for 3 albums or so before they brought it back, but Dynasty I thought was a pretty weak album. It opens with I Was Made for Loving You, which is a good song, but nothing really else on it. And then Unmasked was just a slog to get through. I don't think it had any really memorable songs on it. Music from the Elder was an interesting one, though. I can tell why a lot of people don't like it. I liked it, though, and I think it's because I like the one thing that it does well, which is like very cheesy 80s fantasy. Like, I love The Dark Crystal and The Labyrinth and Legend. I love movies like that, and this album was made to accompany a movie like that. Of course, they abandoned the movie when the album sold so badly that they couldn't even do a supporting tour. By now, Peter Criss is out of the band. He's been out for a couple albums, even though he was credited in Unmasked. He didn't play. And then Music from the Elder is Ace Frehley's last album. He is credited on their next album, Creatures of the Night, and shows up on the cover, but he did not play. These next two albums, though, Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up, are absolutely Kiss being back. These, on my list, are up with Destroyer as being some of their best work. And it is so good to hear Kiss be back at their best with these albums. And it's not like these are nostalgia fests either. Like they are breaking some new ground with this, going into the 80s with something a little bit stronger and more aggressive. So they're effectively transitioning to a hair metal sound here for these next two albums, Animalize and Asylum. And I kept thinking that these albums were going to be Kiss phoning it in, that they were going to be, weak somehow, and they really weren't. Heaven's on Fire, oh my God, it's one of their best songs. Crazy Nights went in a little bit more of a poppy direction. A lot of people say this is Kiss's worst album or one of their worst. I still liked it, but it definitely wasn't as good as the previous several albums. And then the next one, Hot in the Shade, was one where I did think that was a noticeably weaker album, one of their worst. And they continue reinventing themselves with Revenge in 1992, which I thought was okay. This is a little bit more of it's a similar sound to their 80s hair metal, but a bit of the glam has been stripped away, and it's a little more straightforward. And then they actually record and release a grunge album. And when I heard that it was a grunge album, I expected it was going to be awful, but turns out it wasn't. I mean, they were surprisingly intuitive and intentional with adapting to music changes. And this is about the point where I realized that Kiss, while they only really write one kind of song, and these are intended to be radio hits, they are surprisingly adaptable, and that is something that I respect about them. If their career does take another dip, it's for these next two albums. The first being Psycho Circus, which was a bummer because this is the original lineup coming back. But I thought the album was a bit boring. I thought the same for Sonic Boom. I remember when that album was released. I never bought it, but it was a big deal with Walmart. They had like exclusive rights to it. And then I wasn't expecting much from their final album, released in 2012, Monster, but I was very pleasantly surprised for this one. They really brought it back. Gene had said that they didn't use any digital equipment for Monster, that it was all analog, and I don't know if I totally believe that or not, but I certainly can believe them. It translates to a much bigger and more natural sound. So that's what I thought about Kiss's discography. There is my album ranking. Now, Kiss is one of those bands where you can just get a greatest hits, or you can get their Alive albums. They're live albums that are called Alive. If you get Alive 1 and 2, you're going to hear them at their best with their best songs. So that's a great way to get into them. But Destroyer, Creatures, and Love Gun, I thought were their clear best. 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 in that vein. And then from Hotter Than Hell all the way down to Revenge are albums that are pretty good. That I had a pretty positive opinion. Like I said, Kiss is a surprisingly consistent band. That leaves Psycho Circus to Peter Criss's albums being albums that I did not have a positive opinion about coming away with. So that's what I thought. Thank you for listening. Here are my favorite Kiss songs. I'm actually going to make a part 2 for my favorite Kiss songs because I don't want to shove all of my favorite Kiss songs within a 40-second time frame. That's all I have left in the video.